So we're still talking about the storm. It's nearly been 2 weeks on, and unfortunately, as I sit here now at the moment County Cavan, all County Cavan, there's still 600 people without electricity. Imagine that, nearly 2 weeks on. There's still 600 people without electricity. Earlier yesterday, it's gone down a good bit. It was 1,000 yesterday. Now it's 600, so it's getting there. But what I'm trying to say is particularly a lot of elderly people are affected because it's in the back end of nowhere at the moment. In terms of where the power isn't working. But this is the thing, and there's many things to talk about here, that a lot of elderly people particularly were failed by the state, and it's clear to be seen, and the Irish people were failed too by the state. The state basically left people to their own devices and didn't bother to do anything to help anybody. As many people point out with the community hubs, etc., the army and God, the Sinn Féin or the local authorities should have been going out to people's houses, particularly elderly people, because again, they have all this information, they know rightly who's living in each house, etc. They can get all the information at the touch of a button if they wanted to. And the fact that and I know a few elderly people I know, you had no power, but thankfully they have power today, but they didn't have it last week and had to go to these community hubs. And a lot of them had to ask their neighbours to bring them because some of them don't have cars. They rely on public transport, etc., and the elderly people, retired people. There was no such thing as, we send the army out to pick you up, or we send on God the Sinn Féin out to pick you up and bring you there. We'll get you stuff. You have no food in the fridge. There was no such thing. We're going to make sure you get food and so people had to reach out for help. What I'm trying to say is the fact of the matter that there was no army, nobody at all banged on anybody's door to see were they okay, or elderly people particularly. Take for example, my father lives in his own too. Technically, he has a good lot of people around him to care for him, etc. He wasn't without power for the last week, but he has power since Monday gone by, the beginning of Monday, by holiday Monday. So technically, that's great. But long story short, there was nobody, and he's a man at 71. There was no, I didn't see on Garda Síochána. There was no on Garda Síochána. There was no, I didn't see the local authority. I didn't see anybody. I didn't see my TDs knocking on his door saying, did he need anything? A man at 71 that worked all his life in the state. I didn't see one of them. Not one of them were about. And not one of them were about when I was talking to them about, they had to go looking for them to tell them about how long he had to wait for an ambulance that time. Anyway, that's a long story. But what I'm trying to say is people shouldn't have had to go looking. The army should have been out, or the guards, knocking on elderly people, so particularly elderly people who are on their own. It's difficult when you're on your own, etc. It's difficult if you're in towns, but people in the back end of nowhere, in rural County Cavan, a lot of them don't have transport. They're relying on friends, they're relying on family. And again, the state didn't do that. People had to go, and again, many people have said it to me, even people with families, etc. There was no contact from the government, no contact from the state, only for them going to community hubs. The guards, and nobody bothered to go up to them and see were they okay. Was people okay? Did they need anything? Did they need food? Did they need water? What did they need? Nobody went to them. What I'm trying to say is the army should have been sent out, or on God, they should have caught up. To knock on people's doors to see are they okay? Do they need any assistance? It's the fact of the matter the state just kind of told everybody we don't give a fuck, pretty much. That was the response. Imagine, and again, people keep saying it, a few years ago they were saying about COVID, etc., or protect Granny and stuff like that. Pretty much nowadays it's fuck Granny. Who cares about Granny? But it's funny, the mainstream media and even Cavan media here, not one of them said anything about the direct provision sector, so I presume the direct provision sectors had generators. Because again, if the direct provision sector lost power, there would be uproar. Believe me, RT would go mad if one direct provision sector didn't have power and they couldn't charge the phones, etc. There would be anarchy. The RT and the mainstream media would go mad. They would go ballistic. So I presume none of them lost power at any stage. But again, the majority of the people, the Irish people, they don't really care about Irish people because Irish people are second-class citizens. It's just putting it out there because it simply is the truth. We can't deny the truth, and that's the simple that loads of elderly people just left, and we see a man literally froze to death in his home down in the country, and unfortunately he's passed away. But he was pretty much froze to death. He probably didn't know who to reach out. Nobody checked on him, and pretty much he probably froze to death. He suffered from hypothermia. I don't know of all the details of it. That was in the news there recently, yesterday evening, and probably many like him, unfortunately, that are literally dead in the house because they have no heat, no anything like that. And no such thing as the government helping them out, etc. Now we move on to the next thing. I'll give you more details when I find that, but I'd look into the story a bit more. But I wouldn't be surprised because again, there was a few cold nights. The other few nights have been cold, and particularly if you have no electric heating, if you have no fire, how else are you going to heat yourself? The other thing I want to talk about is the ESB, and the ESB obviously has huge profits. They made tons of money the last few years. They basically won away with fortunes, small fortunes, well, big fortunes, may I say, billions of euro taken for the Irish taxpayer. And the ESB are saying now the cost of repairs, etc., because obviously it's a lot of money to have to pay people overtime, etc., it's going to fall on you and me, the taxpayer, the people who are paying an electricity bill. And there's basically going to be no compensation too for people who are a long time without electricity. So there's going to be no compensation, which is utterly insane. They want people to pay more, but then when people, I wouldn't mind myself, my electricity came on quick enough, but other people's electricity didn't come on quick enough, and I think it's unreasonable and it's unfair to ask people who are still waiting, like take for example them 600 people in Cavan, or even the 1,000 people yesterday, to go and come up with a bill, with maybe €500 each month or something like that. 600, God forbid, and they didn't have power for half of the month, and then they come along with a big bill. It doesn't make any sense. Especially because, again, the huge profits. Again, ESB is owned, it's 97.9% or something like that owned by the government. The other 3% is kind of private entity. But the government, the state owns the majority of it. And particularly because, again, the majority of people, and people keep saying it, the OT and the West and won't talk about, but the state failed people. The government and the state failed people. The system failed. Everything failed. The whole phone networks and everything failed. The state failed the people of Ireland. They didn't fail anybody else, but they failed the people of Ireland. Obviously, the data centres didn't lose power. Don't worry about that. They didn't lose power. They would have been, and I say the weapon vision centres, the wall looked after there. But everybody else down the country, they couldn't give a shit. Paddy and Mary in a house in the one worked all their life, couldn't give a shit. The state didn't give a shit. And just to put it straight, they didn't give a shit. There's still people without power. They don't give a shit. Simple as that. There's no urgency or anything. And again, the army wasn't, as far as I can get, the army wasn't mobilised. The whole defence force should have been mobilised. To assist moving trees, etc., etc. They should have been done, or even just to check up on elderly people, bring them to the community hubs, etc., etc. Because that's what the army's there for. They're there to defend the state and to help out in times of emergency, and it was a time of emergency. But that's a whole other kettle of fish. We can argue about that till the cows come home. But I think it's unreasonable that people would have to pay the cost of repairs, etc., etc. It's not fair. It's simply not fair. People are paying enough in electricity. Like a few months, I had a bill of 200 or 300 for a month. Of a bill, and half the time I'm not even here to relieve, half of the time I'm at work, so it's only really in the evening times. And I wouldn't mind at Christmas. Christmas would be expensive anyway, but when I'm not here half the time, how would it be that, I suppose, in the way? And again, we have to remember Ireland has the highest electricity prices in Europe, and they want us to pay more now because, again, the ESB just want more money. It's just greed. It's simple as that, because they have hundreds of billions of euro the last few years just robbing it off people. Because it's all greed. Simple as that. It's all greed. And again, the government shut down peat power plants in the Midlands there, and all going with wind turbines, etc., etc. And they pretty much crippled the electricity grid because they got rid of the peat turbines and the tough power plants too, just to have a green energy, etc. And there wasn't enough energy, and it was clearly that it didn't work out too well. But the data centers were alright, so that's the main thing. But yeah, it's this joke that still people are waiting, and I think around the country the latest figures is about 20,000, or 30,000 around that, give or take. And again, we're 2 weeks on, but the main thing is that we're a first world country. This is the thing people keep saying. We're one of the richest countries in the world. It's insane. It's insane. And any real emergency ever came, the state isn't prepared. The state doesn't give a shit. Doesn't seem to. Because again, national security. It's funny to hear me or Hamas say now, national security, is a priority, etc., etc. Because it doesn't look that way to me in the terms of because again, he doesn't believe in the backwards looking idea of sovereignty. So if you add two and two together, you get your answer. But yes, it's Becker's belief. But anyway, thank you everyone. I do hope anybody who's watching this video do have the power. Hopefully they do in the water. I know in some places there's issues with water still. And again, this is just the thing. And again, this has been pointed out hundreds of times over the last 5 years, 6 years, that there's problems with the water infrastructure, that it was said in Cavan many times before this happened, that it would collapse if something came along, that the whole system would just fail. And it did. So thank you for watching, subscribe more, and bye.